I used to work night shifts at a distribution warehouse in Ohio. Big place, almost 4 football fields long. The graveyard shift was always quiet. Just the hum of conveyor belts, forklifts, moving pallets, and the occasional clang of metal echoing through the aisles. There were usually only 5 of us working, between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. most of the time. We were spread out so far apart, you barely saw anyone until break time. One night around 2 a.m., I was in Section D, stacking boxes on a pallet when I noticed movement at the far end of the aisle. Someone in an orange safety vest walked by slowly. I called out, "Hey, you good?" No answer. I figured it was just one of the new guys zoning out, so I went back to work. A few minutes later, I saw him again, this time closer. Same vest, same slow walk. Still no response. I radioed my supervisor, asked if anyone was assigned to Section D. He said no, everyone's over by the dock area. You're the only one there. I froze. When I turned back toward the aisle, the figure was gone. I walked the entire length of the row. Nothing. Just empty racks and flickering lights. Later, during our 3 a.m. break, I mentioned it to one of the older workers. He looked up from his coffee and said quietly, "You saw him too, huh? The one with the vest." He told me years ago, a worker had been crushed under a faulty forklift in that same section. And the weird part, he was wearing an orange vest, just like the one I'd seen. After that, I switched to day shift. I still don't know what I saw that night, but I'll never forget how silent that warehouse felt after 3 a.m. This happened in 2018 when I worked maintenance at an old steel plant in Pennsylvania. The factory had been around since the 1950s. Rusted pipes, broken vents, and miles of dimly lit corridors. Half the place wasn't even operational anymore. My shift ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Usually, I'd make rounds, check pressure gauges, and make sure the emergency systems were working. One night, around 2:30, I was doing my usual patrol when a fire alarm suddenly started blaring in one of the shutdown zones, Section C14. The problem? That section hadn't had power in over 10 years. I radioed control. They said the same thing. There was no way the alarm could have triggered, but the sound was definitely real, echoing through the halls, piercing and high-pitched. I grabbed my flashlight and went to check it out. When I reached C14, everything was pitch black. Dust covered the floor, and the air was thick with the smell of metal and oil. The alarm box was flashing red, but the wires weren't even connected. And just as I leaned in to inspect it, I heard footsteps, heavy, slow, crunching on the gravel behind me. I turned my light. Nothing, but the footsteps continued, circling behind me. Staying just out of the beam, I started backing up toward the exit when the alarm suddenly stopped. Total silence. Then clang. Something hit the metal wall next to me hard enough to rattle it. I ran back in control. I told the supervisor what happened. He just nodded and said, "You're not the first. That section's where a worker died in a fire back in '89. Every few months, the system trips itself, even without power." I transferred out 2 weeks later. To this day, I can still hear that alarm in my head, echoing through the dark. My dad worked in a small furniture factory when I was in college. In 2021, the company announced they were shutting it down, and my dad volunteered to stay on a few extra weeks to help close the place, mostly night security, just making sure no one broke in to steal equipment. On his second to last night, I stopped by to bring him some dinner around midnight. The factory floor was massive, lit by a few overhead bulbs and emergency lights near the exits. You could hear every creak and groan of the building settling. We ate together in the break room. Then he went to do his rounds while I waited in the car scrolling on my phone. About 15 minutes later, my dad came running out the back door, pale as a ghost. He said he'd been walking near the sanding machines when he heard someone whisper, "You're not supposed to be here." He turned around. No one. He thought it was just an echo, or maybe wind through the ducts. Then he heard it again, this time right behind him. He spun around with his flashlight, and there was a figure standing in the doorway, covered in dust and wearing an old company apron. When my dad shouted, the figure turned and stepped into the wall. He quit that night. A few months later, I talked to one of his old co-workers. They said a man had died there years ago after getting caught in one of the sanding belts, and the apron my dad described, it matched the old factory uniforms they stopped using in the 90s. Have you ever experienced something you can't explain? Share your story in the comments.